My name's Howard. I'm 25 years old and live on my family's small farm in the middle of Arkansas. I help take care of it whenever my parents go out of town. It's not a big operation, just a quiet family farm surrounded by acres of crops and endless trees. My parents always talk about how they want me to take over when they get too old since I'm the oldest of three and their only son. But honestly, I don't want that life. I can't imagine being stuck out here forever, surrounded by silence and cornfields. Especially not after what happened last July. My parents were on a romantic week-long trip, leaving the place in the care of me and my two sisters, Crystal and Morgan. We were supposed to feed the animals, water the crops, and make sure everything ran smoothly until they got back. There's not much around our property, just flat land, some woods in the distance, and a whole lot of nothing. That kind of isolation used to feel peaceful, but lately, it started to feel too quiet, too empty. That night, like any other, we were winding down for bed. Crystal was upstairs doing her online college work. She takes summer courses, while Morgan and I were sitting in the living room watching something stupid on TV. None of us are really into farm life. We've all dreamed of getting out, of doing something bigger, especially me. But dreams felt a long way off that night. Because before long, the dogs started going wild in the backyard. The barking hit like an alarm, deep, aggressive, nonstop. It wasn't their normal reaction to raccoons or coyotes. Something was wrong. I went outside and both dogs were staring toward the cornfield, growling low and snapping at the air. Whatever they saw or smelled, it had them terrified. I yelled at them to quiet down, and they did. For a second, the whole night went dead silent. Then I heard it. A whistle. Not a bird or the wind, but a person. A long, slow human whistle, coming from inside the corn. My heart started pounding. I'd heard stories of people stealing from nearby farms before, but this was the first time I was dealing with a trespasser myself, and Dad wasn't here to handle it. I ran back inside and grabbed one of the guns we kept for emergencies. When I told my sisters that someone was out in the cornfield, they both panicked and told me not to go out there. They were right. It was pitch black, and those tall stalks were like a maze. One wrong step, and I'd lose my bearings completely. So instead, I stepped back outside, aimed the gun into the air, and fired a single shot. The sound echoed across the property, cutting through the still night. The dogs fell silent again. I shouted into the dark, "Get off our land," as loud as I could. Then I went back inside, my adrenaline still rushing. My sisters laughed nervously, saying that should have scared off whoever it was. For a few minutes, we all managed to calm down. But the quiet didn't last. The dogs started barking again, louder this time. I sprinted to the back door, gun in hand, and froze when I saw him. There was a man standing maybe 20 feet from the dogs, right at the edge of the cornfield. He wasn't moving, just staring. For a few seconds, neither of us did anything. I shouted, "Hey!" And as soon as I did, he turned and bolted straight into the corn. The stalks rattled violently as he disappeared into the dark. I fired another warning shot into the air, but there was no chance I was following him in there. No way. I ran to the dogs, unclipped their chains, and brought them inside with me. They were trembling, whining, tails tucked tight between their legs. I told my sisters what happened, and they were both terrified. Morgan grabbed her phone and called our dad. He told me I had to be the man of the house and protect my sisters, that if the guy came back, I should fire another warning shot. That advice didn't help much. We were all shaken. My sisters took the dogs into their rooms and locked the doors. I took the gun to my room, leaving the window slightly open in case I heard anything else. I tried watching a movie to distract myself, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept circling back to that man's face, or what little I saw of it. I didn't know if he was drunk, dangerous, or just insane, but he was out there, and I could feel it. It was maybe an hour later when I heard it again. The whistling. Same tone. Same mocking, slow rhythm. I jumped off the bed and rushed to the window. My heart stopped when I saw a shadow moving across the yard. It was him, walking slowly through the grass, his head tilted up like he knew exactly where my room was. He was still whistling. Then he stopped, turned his head, and stared right at my window. I didn't think. I just grabbed the gun, aimed out the window, and fired a shot into the grass a few feet from him, close enough to make a point but not hit him. He froze for half a second, then took off running, disappearing around the side of the house and out of sight. That was the last time I saw him. We never found out who it was, or why he was there. Maybe it was some teenager trying to mess with us, Or maybe someone dangerous testing how far they could push before we reacted. All I know is, something about that night changed how I feel about this place. The farm doesn't feel like home anymore. It feels like something's watching from the cornfields, waiting for the next time the dogs start barking. My name's Howard, and for about a year, I worked as a night restock worker at a supermarket called Great America, the biggest one in our small rural town. My shift began right after closing at 10 p.m. and ran until around 3 a.m. Most nights were quiet, dull, and uneventful. Just me, the hum of the freezers, and the occasional clatter of cans on metal shelves. Usually, we worked in pairs. It would either be me and Terry, Carter, or Alfonso. That night, I was supposed to work with Terry. I clocked in, unlocked the back door with my key, and pushed into the storeroom. The place was silent except for the buzzing of a single flickering light. Rows of unopened boxes stretched down the concrete floor. I loaded a pallet of bread and nuts onto the jack and rolled it toward the aisles. The store lights were dim, and the long aisles looked like empty tunnels. I started restocking the bread section, rotating the older loaves to the front, new ones to the back. About 30 minutes in, I realized I hadn't seen Terry yet. Normally, he'd crack a joke or blast his music by now. I decided to check the back room. His stuff wasn't there, but the door I'd left cracked open for him was now shut tight. I frowned. I'd wedged it with a metal stopper. There's no way it could have closed by itself. When I opened it, stopper was kicked outside. I called his name, Terry. My voice echoed across the shelves. No answer. I grabbed my phone and called him. He picked up, sounding half asleep. Hey man, I said. You here? Doors shut, and I thought. He interrupted, groggy. Nah, I'm home. Called out sick tonight. For a moment, I didn't say anything. My skin prickled. Someone moved the doorstop. Thought you came in. It probably just slipped, he said. Those things come loose sometimes. But it didn't. I'd wedged it under tight. After hanging up, I scanned backroom. Empty. I shook it off and went back to the aisle. But that uneasy feeling never left. Silence felt too heavy, too still. I went back to work, trying to convince myself that nothing was wrong. But the feeling of being watched clung to me like static. Every squeak of the pallet jack, every hum from the freezer seemed louder than usual. I kept glancing down the aisles, half expecting someone to walk by. Then, a sharp clang echoed across the shopping floor, like something heavy had fallen. My heart jumped. I froze, listening. The sound had come from the far end of the store. Slowly, I walked toward the middle aisle, the one that cut straight through the store. When I reached it, I looked down and saw movement at the other end. A man dressed in all black walked past the dairy aisle. His head tilted slightly down, but I could tell he was looking in my direction. For a moment, everything felt unreal, like I was trapped in a scene from a horror movie. My breath caught in my throat. Then logic tried to take over. Maybe it was someone filling in for Terry. Maybe the boss forgot to tell me. I started walking faster, calling out, "Hey, you work here." My voice echoed down the long aisle, unanswered. As I passed each section, I glanced left and right. Nothing. When I reached the front half of the store, I spotted him again. He was standing at the end of one of the side aisles, his body perfectly still, facing me. The overhead lights buzzed faintly above him, flickering for a second. When he noticed me staring, he didn't speak. He just stepped sideways, vanishing behind the shelves. "Hey," I shouted again, this time louder. I jogged toward him, trying to catch up, my footsteps slapping against the tile floor. When I reached the spot, he was gone. I turned toward the registers, empty. Then my eyes flicked toward the bread aisle. That's when I saw him again. He was standing at the far end, half hidden behind a display rack, only part of his face visible. His mouth was hanging open, his lips twitching into a grin. And then, slowly, silently, he raised one hand and waved me over. Something about his expression made my stomach twist. He didn't look confused or scared. He looked entertained. I froze there for a few seconds, staring down the aisle at that unsettling grin. His face didn't move, his arms still lifted in that slow, mocking wave. The light above him flickered again, making his eyes look hollow. I shouted, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" But he didn't answer. He just stood there, half his body hidden behind the shelf, before ducking out of sight. That was it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I wasn't about to play hide and seek with a stranger inside a dark supermarket. But my body moved before my mind did. I ran down the aisle, calling out again, "Hey, stop right there." When I reached the end, the space behind the shelf was empty. I spun around, nothing. Just the faint hum of the lights above and the steady sound of my own breathing. The whole place suddenly felt too big, too quiet. I turned toward the front of the store and caught a glimpse of movement again. The man, standing at the other end by the bread aisle. He hadn't even tried to hide this time. He stood there, still and strange, that same twisted grin stretching across his face. Something about him didn't feel right. His posture, his stare, even from this distance, it didn't feel human. My voice came out shaky as I said, "Look, you can't be in here after hours. You need to leave." No response, just that stare. Then, without warning, he stepped backward behind the shelf again, disappearing completely. That was enough for me. I turned and bolted toward the exit doors, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my keys. Outside, I could finally breathe again. I unlocked my car, jumped inside, and locked the doors immediately. My hands were trembling as I reached for my phone and called my boss. When he answered, I blurted out everything. The door, the noise, the man inside the store. He didn't sound surprised. He just told me, "Try to get him out if you can, or call the cops." Get him out? Not a chance. Whoever that was, he wasn't normal. My gut was screaming at me to stay away. So, I called 911. As I waited in my car for the police, I kept my eyes locked on those big glass doors. The fluorescent lights inside the store flickered faintly, but there was no sign of movement. Still, the silence outside didn't feel peaceful. It felt watched. The red and blue lights painted the parking lot within 10 minutes. Relief washed over me when I saw the police car pull up beside mine. I stepped out quickly, trying to steady my voice as I explained everything. The man, the door, the noises. The officer, calm and professional, nodded and said, "Let's go take a look." We entered the store together. The moment those fluorescent lights flickered on again, the silence hit harder than before. Every sound echoed. Our footsteps, the faint buzz of the overhead lights, the hum of the refrigerators. We walked aisle by aisle. My palms were sweaty, my breath shallow. For a few minutes, nothing seemed out of place. Then, as we turned into the cereal aisle, I saw him again. He was standing there, motionless, at the far end of the aisle, staring at us. That same black outfit. That same grin. His lips curved unnaturally wide, eyes hollow and tired, like he hadn't slept in weeks. The officer's voice broke the silence. "Sir, come over here." For a long, tense moment, the man didn't move. Then suddenly, he did. He began walking toward us slowly, that eerie grin never fading. My chest tightened as he got closer, his eyes locked directly on mine. When he finally reached us, the officer turned him around and cuffed him. The man didn't resist. He just kept smiling and licking his lips. The officer asked, "What are you doing in here?" The man's voice was low, cracked, and calm when he said, "Just looking for a snack." That was all he said. Over and over again when questioned, just looking for a snack. The officer started escorting him outside, but the entire time, the man kept staring at me through the glass doors, smiling that same twisted, knowing smile. It wasn't the look of a stranger caught trespassing. It was something darker, something personal. When they finally drove away, I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty parking lot. The store was quiet again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd left something behind. That smile burned into my mind. I went back inside to finish my shift, though every sound made me jump. Needless to say, I never left the doors open again. And every night since then, whenever I pass that back door, I can still feel eyes on me, like he's waiting out there, still smiling, still hungry. About 8 years ago, when I was 19, my friends James, Sean, and I did something really stupid. Back then, doing stupid things was just what we did to kill time. I don't talk to James anymore, but Sean and I still keep in touch, and every now and then we end up talking about this night. We grew up in small-town New Jersey. Lots of abandoned houses, half-empty streets, and rumors about haunted places. But the one that everyone knew about sat on top of a steep hill, an old abandoned church on a road that had been closed off for years. No one really knew why it had been left to rot. The windows were boarded, the roof sagging, and the gravel parking lot was overtaken by weeds. It was October when we decided to go there, probably because we were in that Halloween mood. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple: bring a Ouija board, sneak inside at midnight, and see what happens. Sean already had one collecting dust in his closet, so he grabbed it. I drove. We picked up James, then Sean, and headed toward the hill. The road was blocked off halfway up, so we parked on the shoulder and walked the rest of the way, trying not to attract attention. We used one flashlight between the three of us. The air was cold, the trees bare, and the only sound was gravel crunching under our shoes. When we reached the top, the church looked even creepier up close. The massive front door was cracked open, scraping against the floor whenever it moved. The walls were covered in graffiti, the glass windows shattered. We pushed the door open together and stepped inside. Our flashlights swept across rows of broken pews and collapsed beams. The air was thick with dust and mildew. It was dead silent, until Sean started setting up the board. He pulled 3 candles from his backpack and said, "It'll make the experience better." He placed them in a triangle around the Ouija board, lit each one, and told us to turn off our flashlights. The room went black except for the flicker of those 3 tiny flames. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The shadows danced across the walls, and every sound echoed. Sean put his fingers on the planchette and said, "Is anyone here with us?" We laughed at first. It felt ridiculous. Then the planchette started to move. I was sure one of them was pushing it, but we went along anyway. The board slowly spelled out random letters. We joked about ghosts spelling nonsense. But then, from the far side of the church, near the altar, a sharp cracking noise broke through the silence. It sounded like wood splitting, loud and deliberate. All 3 of us froze. Sean grabbed his phone light, pointed it toward the altar, and whispered, "Did you hear that?" There was no one there, just dust, debris, and old pews. The sound had been so clear, it couldn't have been the wind. We tried to laugh it off. The church was ancient. Maybe something just fell apart. Still, none of us were as relaxed anymore. We kept playing, but the planchette wouldn't move again. The tension was thick now. Every creak, every echo made us jump. Then it happened again, another sound from the altar. This time quicker, sharper. Before we could even shine our lights over there, something slammed onto the Ouija board. It was a rock, the size of a golf ball, landing right between our hands. We screamed. All 3 of us jumped up, knocking over a candle. There was no way any of us could have done that. It came from above, or behind, or somewhere we didn't see. We bolted. No hesitation. We ran out of that church, down the hill, tripping through the gravel path until we saw the car. We didn't stop running until we were in the car, doors locked, engine running. We just sat there, breathing hard, staring at each other. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then Sean whispered, "We talked to something." I shook my head. I didn't believe in ghosts, but that didn't mean I wasn't terrified. I told him I thought someone had been hiding in the church with us, someone who threw that rock. The thought made my skin crawl. Eventually, we drove back to James's house and sat there in the driveway for 30 minutes, replaying what happened again and again. None of it made sense. The next day, Sean, being superstitious, went back with James to retrieve the Ouija board. When they entered, the candles were still there, melted halfway down. But the board was gone. Not broken. Not burned. Just missing. They left immediately, and none of us ever went back. To this day, we still argue about what really happened that night. Whether it was a spirit, or someone hiding in that church. I don't know. But that crack of wood, that rock, and that empty altar still echo in my head like it happened yesterday. When I was 19, I worked nights at a small pizza shop to help pay for food and gas. The work was easy. Take orders, pack the food, drive it to the address, and head back. I'd done it 100 times before. Nothing weird ever happened. It was repetitive, but simple. Tips were usually around $3 to $5, sometimes more if people felt generous. That night, I got a small order, a chicken parm hero and a regular slice. I didn't expect much of a tip, but I had no choice in the deliveries I took. I started my car and headed toward the address. The GPS took me to a dead-end street that felt strangely isolated. The neighborhood suddenly looked different, almost rural. One house had an old RV parked on the lawn beside a small patch of woods. Others looked like tiny farmhouses with wide yards. When I reached the address, it was a small, odd-looking house sitting on a huge property. Right next to it stood what looked like an abandoned home, grass overgrown, shrubs tangled. It was close to 6 p.m., the sky dimming, and most houses had lights on by now. But this one was completely dark. As I parked, I noticed the front door slightly open. I stepped out of the car, pizza bag in hand, and walked toward the cracked front door. That's when I heard it. Faint piano music. It sounded distant, muffled through a few walls, like someone playing from another room. I knocked. No answer. I rang the bell. It didn't work. The piano continued, calm but eerie, looping the same few notes. Feeling uneasy, I walked around the house toward the back. The yard was a mess. Junk scattered across the grass, an old broken chain-link fence lying flat, rusted tools, and buckets. The back door had a glass panel. Through it, I saw what looked like a chaotic mudroom. I knocked again, nothing. I went back to the front, called the pizzeria to double-check the address. After a pause, my coworker confirmed I was at the right place. So, reluctantly, I pushed the front door open. The piano grew louder. It was an unsettling, repetitive tune. I called out, "Pizza's here." The piano stopped. Then a voice, faint, somewhere deeper inside, called, "Over here." A few seconds later, the piano started again. I stepped inside. The air smelled musty, damp, like the place had been closed up for months. It was hard to see, no lights anywhere. I walked slowly toward the sound of the music. The floor creaked beneath my shoes. When I reached what seemed like a foyer, a heavy unease set in. My instincts screamed to leave. I called again, "I'm by the front door, sir." The piano stopped for the last time. Now, only silence. I froze, waiting for footsteps, movement, anything. Nothing. Then a man's voice, faint but close, said, "Yes, sorry. I have trouble walking. Could you bring it in here, please?" I swallowed hard. "What room are you in, sir?" He paused before answering. "Just walk through the living room. I'm in the dining room." There were no delivery notes saying I had to go inside. My pulse quickened. Still, a part of me thought, maybe it really was some old man struggling to get up. I took a few cautious steps through the living room. Ahead, I saw a doorway. I leaned just far enough to peek around the corner. There was the piano, but no one sitting at it. The bench was empty. I didn't wait to see more. Quietly, I turned back, walked fast toward the front door, and slipped outside. My heart was pounding. I shut the door, hurried to my car, and drove straight back to the pizzeria. When I told my boss, he didn't argue. He just nodded, said I did the right thing. The supposed customer never called asking where their order went. That alone said everything. Later that night, curiosity got the best of me. I searched the address online. My blood ran cold. The house had been foreclosed months ago. It was officially listed as vacant. I realized I'd walked into an abandoned home, one where someone had been hiding. Whether it was a setup for a robbery or something worse, I didn't want to know. To this day, whenever I see a dim house on a dead-end street, I still think about that piano playing in the dark and the voice that said, "Over here."